Human interactions are often messy, complex, and sometimes utterly paradoxical. You've likely experienced this. Someone rejects you, pushes you aside, or dismisses you at a time when you're most vulnerable. They make it clear that they want no part in your life, and the pain is undeniably real. Yet, in a strange twist of fate, time passes, and the person who once turned away from you now returns, seeking your attention, forgiveness, and perhaps your presence in their life. This sudden reappearance isn't a coincidence. It's not simply that they've realized the depth of your value. No, the truth is far more profound, and it's wrapped in the Stoic understanding of human nature, ego, and the power of self-control. Why do they come back? The answer lies not in the whims of others, but in the natural cycles of life. Rejection, when it occurs, often leads to deep reflection. It forces people to assess themselves and their choices. As they encounter the consequences of their actions, they may begin to regret the decision to push you away. Yet this doesn't mean you should simply accept their return without scrutiny. Stoicism teaches us that what we control is how we respond to external events, not the events themselves. In this exploration, we will examine 5 situations where you should never remain silent when these individuals reappear. Stoic philosophers like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus taught that silence in the face of injustice or manipulation is not wisdom, but passivity. Silence at the wrong time can send a dangerous message that you are still vulnerable to their whims. The Stoic response, however, is one of measured, thoughtful action. You must rise above the emotions that may seek to cloud your judgment and assert your own sense of dignity. Number 1. When they try to undermine your self-worth, there are few things more painful than rejection, especially when it leads to deep self-doubt. After someone rejects you, whether it's in a personal relationship, a professional setting, or even a social context, you're left grappling with feelings of inadequacy. You begin questioning your worth, wondering where you went wrong. These feelings are valid, but they are also temporary. You possess within you the ability to transcend them. But the problem isn't always self-doubt. Sometimes, the problem comes from the person who rejected you in the first place. They may return, not just seeking a chance to rekindle a relationship, but subtly trying to undermine the progress you've made in their absence. They might attempt to diminish your achievements, downplay your strength, or mock the growth you've experienced while they were gone. This isn't just an isolated incident, it's a manipulative attempt to reassert dominance or remind you of their importance. This situation is precisely when silence becomes dangerous. Remaining quiet in such a moment is not an act of wisdom. It is an act of compliance, of surrendering your power. As Stoics, we understand that while we cannot control the actions of others, we can control our responses to them. When someone attempts to undermine your value, speaking up becomes not just necessary, it becomes an act of preservation. As Epictetus wisely said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This is where you take your stand. Silence here can be interpreted as agreement, or worse, a sign that you are still vulnerable to their influence. A Stoic does not allow others to define their worth, and neither should you. In the face of such undermining, you must speak. Not to fight, not to argue, but to reaffirm your own sense of self. Imagine this. When someone attempts to belittle your achievements, you calmly and clearly remind them of your journey, not out of spite, but to reclaim your narrative. I have worked hard to get where I am. I have faced challenges and overcome them. I value myself because I've done the work to value myself. It is not a boastful statement, but a simple declaration of your truth. Your silence may be misinterpreted as weakness or compliance, but your words, when chosen carefully, will reinforce your strength and resilience. Furthermore, this is not about asserting dominance or superiority over the other person. It's about ensuring that you are not defined by their rejection, and that you do not place your sense of self in their hands. You must remind them, gently but firmly, that you are the architect of your own worth. You have spent too much time overcoming internal struggles to let someone who once rejected you dictate your emotional landscape. Silence, in this situation, is a betrayal of your own growth. It signifies that you have not truly learned to value yourself. Speaking up is not about controlling the other person. It's about asserting control over yourself, your values, and your self-respect. Number 2. when they return with empty apologies. It's a familiar scenario. Someone who has rejected you, dismissed your worth, or walked away from you returns with nothing but an apology. It's a moment when the words "I'm sorry" can fill the air, but they come with little weight behind them. They may sound like the right thing to say, but the truth often lies in the actions, or the lack of actions, that follow. The empty apology, just like the empty promises, is a dangerous moment to remain silent. A true believer in Stoicism understands that this is not a time to retreat into silence, hoping for things to improve on their own. It is a time to assert one's self-respect, to make it clear that words without actions hold no value. Many will return after rejecting you, offering apologies as if they could erase the wounds they inflicted on you. But Stoic wisdom tells us that empty apologies only deepen the dishonor. This is why remaining silent is often the worst thing you can do. Silence in this case doesn't protect you. It surrenders your voice and dignity to the whims of someone else's intentions. In Stoic thought, actions define integrity, not apologies. As Marcus Aurelius so often reflected in his meditations, reject your sense of injury and the injury itself disappears. What does this mean in practical terms? When someone apologizes without truly acknowledging the consequences of their actions, they are asking for forgiveness without the work that true reconciliation requires. They are asking for an easy path back into your life without having earned it. For you to remain silent in such a moment is to allow them to pass through the gates of your peace without truly respecting the boundaries you have worked so hard to build. An apology must be backed by tangible change, and silence fails to challenge this standard. Let's consider the situation more deeply. Imagine that someone you trusted has hurt you. They come to you after some time with an apology, perhaps offering a few words of regret, but do you notice the absence of effort? Do you see no sign of real change in their behavior? Are they simply offering words because they want to relieve their own conscience, not because they truly wish to make amends? This is the moment where the Stoic stands firm, where silence would only lead to further disrespect. By staying quiet, you risk allowing the apology to stand in place of genuine change. You risk letting them walk away from the encounter with their pride intact, while your heart remains in turmoil, having received no real closure. The wisdom of the Stoics lies in their recognition that we cannot control the actions of others, but we can always control how we respond. It's not about the words they offer, it's about the truth behind those words. This is where silence loses its power. You must be willing to face the situation head-on and speak your truth. Saying something like, "I hear your apology, but I need to see consistent change in your actions before we can move forward," is not only healthy, it's necessary. Your silence in this moment would only leave you with unresolved feelings and allow someone else to absolve themselves without addressing the deeper issues. In Stoicism, we are taught to focus on what is within our control: our emotions, our reactions, and our principles. If you remain silent in the face of a false or empty apology, you are surrendering control over your own sense of justice. You allow the narrative to be written by someone who doesn't care to change, only to escape. And in doing so, you lose the power to define your own worth. Epictetus once taught, "We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them." Here, the external circumstance is the return of someone with an empty apology, and your response must be a clear, firm assertion of your boundaries. When you accept an apology without demanding change, or without voicing your inner truth, you are reinforcing the idea that you will accept disrespect. This isn't about retaliation, this is about protecting your inner peace. You deserve more than apologies that aren't followed by meaningful actions. You deserve a world where your dignity is never up for negotiation. Think about it. Would a Stoic ever stand by silently when their integrity is on the line? No. Silence, in this case, is not wisdom. It's a quiet submission to something less than you deserve. True wisdom lies in asserting your boundaries with calmness and clarity. And that means speaking up when an apology is only words, not action. When you speak your truth, you uphold the Stoic virtues of courage and justice. And in doing so, you prevent others from exploiting your peace and using you as a stepping stone for their emotional relief. So let's be clear. Silence in the face of empty apologies is a form of complicity. You can and you must take a stand. You owe it to yourself. Number 3. When you're forced to accept injustice. In life, there are moments when you're faced with injustice, whether it's from a colleague, a friend, or even a stranger. This is an uncomfortable reality we must all face at some point, especially as we navigate relationships and systems that don't always operate in our favor. When you're unjustly treated, the immediate temptation may be to remain silent. You may think, it's not worth arguing over, or I'll just let it go. And while Stoicism teaches us the value of peace and self-control, there are moments when silence becomes a surrender. You cannot remain silent when injustice demands your voice. The Stoic way isn't about meek acceptance of every wrong done to you. It's about how you respond to those wrongs. When injustice strikes, your first responsibility is to preserve your dignity and assert your principles. To remain silent when you are being wronged is to let the injustice stand, unchecked. You are giving the other party the power to rewrite your story, to redefine what's acceptable. And while Stoicism advocates for inner peace, it doesn't advise you to be passive in the face of injustice. True peace arises from facing the truth and standing for what is right, not from ignoring the wrongs committed against you. Let's consider a scenario where you've been passed over for a promotion you rightfully deserve. Perhaps someone less qualified has been given the opportunity because of favoritism or bias. You might be tempted to stay silent, to avoid confrontation, to take the high road. But this kind of silence can eat away at your spirit, and over time it can erode your sense of justice. The Stoic perspective isn't about avoiding conflict at all costs. It's about having the wisdom to act at the right moment. In this case, your voice is necessary. You must assert your value. Whether it's a conversation with your boss or a meeting to discuss the issue, staying silent would allow the injustice to perpetuate, not just against you, but against your colleagues as well. Injustice can also appear in more subtle forms. Maybe someone undermines you in a meeting or disrespects your opinion in front of others. The easy way out is to hold your peace, to avoid rocking the boat. But consider this. Silence in this case might feel safe, but it's also a form of acceptance. You're telling the world that it's acceptable to treat you this way, that your voice doesn't matter. And as a Stoic, that's not a message you want to send. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." In situations where injustice is done to you, you must speak the truth. You must stand firm in your principles, refuse to let others dictate your worth or treat you in a way that goes against your values. To be silent in these moments is to let go of your power. When you lose your power, you lose control over your life. Now, let's also recognize that responding to injustice doesn't mean retaliation or anger. Stoicism teaches us that our responses must be measured, calm, and rooted in reason. So while you must speak up, you don't do so out of anger or a desire to get even. The goal is not to cause harm, but to restore fairness and uphold your dignity. This is the essence of a Stoic response to injustice. It is not about revenge, but about justice. A Stoic will address the situation with clarity without losing control over their emotions. This is how you assert your truth without being swept up in the chaos of injustice. To remain silent in the face of injustice is to allow the world to shape you without your consent. But when you stand up and speak out, you are saying, "I will not be silent, and I will not be a passive participant in my own life." You are saying, "I am here, and my voice matters." That's the true power of Stoicism, knowing when to speak and when to act in a way that aligns with your highest values, your moral compass, and your sense of justice. By speaking out, you not only preserve your integrity, but you also give others permission to do the same. When one person stands up against injustice, it creates a ripple effect that encourages others to follow suit. You can be a beacon of truth, a light in a world that often feels dark and chaotic. You can be the one who refuses to accept that wrongs are just part of life, and in doing so, you reaffirm your commitment to the Stoic way, living a life of integrity, honor, and courage. Stoicism is about making the right choices, not the easy ones. It's about standing firm in your beliefs, even when it's uncomfortable. It's about facing life's injustices with strength, wisdom, and the conviction that the truth is worth fighting for. So when injustice comes your way, remember that silence is not the solution. Speak up, stand your ground, and act in a way that reflects your deepest values. This is how you become the master of your fate, the architect of your destiny. This is how you embody the Stoic path. Number 4. When you see someone else suffering and you have the power to help. One of the most significant moments in life is when we see others suffer. Whether it's witnessing someone being mistreated, struggling with their own personal demons, or simply going through a difficult time, the suffering of others can weigh heavily on our hearts. Stoicism teaches us that while we cannot control the pain others experience, we always have control over how we respond. And in those moments of suffering, silence is a choice, but it is a choice that can lead to regret. When you have the power to help someone, to ease their burden, and you choose silence instead, you are not just abandoning them, but you are abandoning your higher self. Think of the countless moments in life when you could have spoken up to offer comfort or aid, yet chose not to. Perhaps a colleague was struggling with a project, and you knew the answer, but said nothing. Maybe a friend was quietly battling depression, and you noticed the signs, but remained silent, thinking it wasn't your place to intervene. Or perhaps you saw an injustice happening to someone else, and you were in a position to stand up for them, yet you held back. Stoicism teaches us that these moments are not insignificant. They are opportunities for us to show kindness, compassion, and strength. As a Stoic, you are expected to be a force for good in the world, a beacon of integrity and wisdom. And in these moments, silence is not the answer. You have the ability to help, to step in, and to use your power to make someone else's burden a little easier to bear. But inaction, in these cases, can be just as harmful as the injustice itself. In the words of Seneca, "No man is a good man who does not wish to help others." Helping others is not a passive act. It's an active pursuit of justice and goodness in the world. When you stay silent in these moments, you are relinquishing your responsibility as a human being to make the world a better place. It's easy to dismiss the struggles of others when we're not directly involved, to pretend that their pain isn't our concern. But Stoicism teaches that humanity is interconnected, and we are all part of the same whole. Your actions, or lack thereof, have ripple effects on the world around you. If you remain silent when someone is suffering, you're contributing to the perpetuation of their suffering. However, silence in the face of someone else's suffering does not always have to be about physical intervention. It may also involve emotional and mental support. If a friend is struggling with a personal loss, and you remain silent, not offering a listening ear or comforting words, you are denying them a chance for healing. Stoicism does not teach that you should intervene in every situation or take on the responsibility of fixing everyone's problems. But it does teach that you should always act with integrity and compassion, and sometimes that means speaking up, offering help, or simply acknowledging the pain someone is going through. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it, and if it is not kind, do not say it." The Stoic approach to suffering is not about being indifferent to the pain of others, but rather acting in a manner that is both kind and just. This is not a passive philosophy. It is an active one that requires you to step up when others are in need, and in doing so, you become a force for good in the world. What happens when we remain silent in these situations is that we let our own fears and insecurities govern our actions. We may fear that we'll say the wrong thing, or that our help won't be appreciated. We might worry about our own comfort or avoid confrontation. But Stoicism teaches us to rise above these fears. Our actions should be based not on what is easy or convenient, but on what is right. And when we help others in their times of need, we're not only serving them, but we're also serving our highest self. In those moments of suffering, your silence is a reflection of your choice. You can either choose to shrink away and let fear dictate your actions, or you can stand firm, speak out, and help. It's in these moments that your character is truly tested. Are you willing to act with integrity, kindness, and strength, or will you remain silent, allowing others to suffer when you could have been their voice? Remember that as a Stoic, you are not just striving for personal mastery, but also for the betterment of the world around you. Your silence in the face of suffering perpetuates the cycle of indifference. But when you choose to speak, to act, to help, you become part of the solution, not the problem. Number 5. When you are witnessing injustice and you have the power to speak out. In a world where injustice runs rampant, there are moments when we bear witness to it with a sense of helplessness. These moments can come in many forms: systemic oppression, bullying in the workplace, unfair treatment in society, or even something as small as someone being belittled in a conversation. The question is, what do you do when you witness injustice? Do you remain silent, believing that it's not your place to intervene, or do you speak out, knowing that your voice could make a difference? For a true Stoic, silence in the face of injustice is never the right choice. Stoicism teaches that we must align our actions with virtue, and one of the core Stoic virtues is justice. Justice is not just an abstract principle, it's something that requires active participation in the world. When we witness wrongdoing and choose not to speak out, we are not acting justly, nor are we fulfilling our responsibility as members of the human community. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic philosopher-emperor, often reflected on the importance of living a life in accordance with virtue, and he stressed the need to act justly, especially in moments when injustice is evident. In his meditations, he wrote, "What is not good for the beehive cannot be good for the bees." This is a reminder that the well-being of the collective is just as important as the well-being of the individual. If we allow injustice to persist, we harm not only those directly affected, but the very fabric of society itself. It's easy to turn a blind eye to injustice, especially when it doesn't directly affect us. Perhaps we feel that speaking out won't make a difference, or that it's too dangerous to challenge authority or stand up to societal norms. These fears are natural, but they must be overcome. Stoicism is about transcending fear and acting in alignment with our highest values. When we witness injustice, silence is not only an act of passivity, it is a form of complicity. Seneca, another Stoic philosopher, believed that inaction in the face of injustice was a failure of virtue. He wrote, "No man is good who does not wish to help others." This means that we must not allow our own comfort or safety to deter us from doing what is right. Justice is not just for the powerful or the influential, it is for everyone, and everyone has a role to play in maintaining it. The Stoic ethos demands that we act when we see injustice, whether that means standing up in a conversation, speaking truth to power, or taking action in a broader social or political context. The idea of speaking out against injustice is deeply tied to the Stoic belief in the importance of integrity. Integrity means standing firm in your principles, even when it's difficult, uncomfortable, or unpopular. When we choose silence in the face of injustice, we are abandoning our integrity. We are sacrificing our responsibility to uphold justice for the sake of comfort or fear. But speaking out is not always easy, and Stoicism does not demand that we act recklessly or without consideration. Stoic wisdom encourages us to be deliberate in our actions, to weigh the consequences of our words and actions, and to make decisions that align with our values. This does not mean that we should be passive in the face of injustice, but rather that we should act with wisdom and self-control, ensuring that our responses are measured and thoughtful, not impulsive or driven by anger. In some situations, speaking out may involve using our voice to challenge the status quo, to question established systems, and to stand up for the marginalized and the oppressed. It may mean confronting societal norms or challenging individuals in positions of power. These actions require courage, strength, and a commitment to the greater good. In these moments, silence is not an option for the Stoic. It is in speaking out that we demonstrate our commitment to justice and to living a virtuous life. It's important to note that speaking out against injustice is not always about grand gestures. It can also be about smaller acts of resistance, standing up for someone who is being mistreated, offering support to those who are vulnerable, or using your platform to amplify the voices of those who have been silenced. Stoicism teaches us that even the smallest acts of justice are significant, and that our contributions, no matter how seemingly insignificant, can have a profound impact. By speaking out, we take a stand for the values we believe in. We show that we will not tolerate injustice, and that we will use our voice to create positive change in the world. It is through these actions that we align ourselves with the Stoic ideal of living life of virtue, not just for our own benefit, but for the benefit of all. In the end, speaking out against injustice is a reflection of our inner strength, our fortitude, and our commitment to living a life of purpose. When we remain silent in these moments, we deny ourselves the opportunity to live with integrity and to make a difference in the world. But when we choose to act, we honor the Stoic principle of justice and fulfill our role as a member of the human community. In the end, silence in the face of injustice or discomfort is not just the absence of speech, it is the absence of action, the absence of our very essence as human beings. We are not merely observers of the world around us, we are participants, stewards of our values, and champions of the virtues we hold dear. The Stoic approach teaches us that true strength is not just in what we endure, but in what we choose to change, to challenge, and to stand up against. In a world that often rewards passivity, the Stoic is a beacon of action. We speak when others would remain silent. We act when others choose to step back. We choose integrity over convenience, virtue over fear. Each time we decide to speak up when we witness injustice, we not only honor the Stoic path, but we contribute to a world that can be better for all. Silence is easy, but it is not the way of the Stoic. The Stoic speaks out, acts with courage, and rises to the occasion, regardless of the challenges they face. So remember, you are not alone on this journey. The Stoics remind us that we all have the potential to shape the world through our actions. Every decision to speak out, every decision to stand firm in our values, is a step toward becoming the best version of ourselves. And in that process, we live with purpose. We live with power. We live with the wisdom to know that in speaking up, we make the world and ourselves better. Before we wrap up, let me ask you a question. What has been your biggest challenge in speaking out or standing up for what is right? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I will personally read all of your comments. Your journey might inspire others, and together we can build a community that values integrity and justice. And if you seriously want to level up in life, don't forget to show some love by hitting the like and subscribe button. Stay strong. Until next time.